Welcome to Magic the Flavouring, the Magic the Gathering podcast, where we talk about all things Magic, flavour design, and lore. I'm your host, Andy Mann, and today I am flying solo. The first time ever. I don't have a guest, I don't have a Nathan, just me and my microphone. I wasn't going to do an episode this week. I was feeling a little bit detached from Magic. I didn't have a guest set up for this particular week coming, and I just thought, is there anything new to say? And then I remembered. Scryfall exists. And there is a random card button on Scryfall. And I was kind of bored. So I thought, why not? Let's go for it. Let's just do a random card Scryfall episode. We've done this once before. Nathan and I just hit that random button. Spoke about whatever card came up, the flavour of the card. I think one of them was even an island. We spoke about the flavour of islands for about 10 minutes. And obviously if there are any problematic cards that pop up, I might just edit those out, but then you wouldn't ever know, would you? But other than that, I'm going to just, whatever card comes up, I'm going to hit that random Scryfall card button, and whatever's there, we will talk about. It's basically just an exercise in the idea that every card in Magic has flavour. Just like how I've been trying to perpetrate this idea that every Magic player has a lore story, every card is flavourful, because that is the game and the wondrousness of the cards that we play. So here we go. I'm just going to dive straight into it. Not even 2 minutes in. Let's go. So let's go to scryfall.com. Obviously, this is a resource. If you don't know what Scryfall is, it's the most thorough online Magic card database. It's absolutely incredible. You can support them financially as well on their website. And yeah, I would just suggest, if you've never looked at Scryfall as a resource for researching Magic cards, or like they have things like you can look up different artists, different what's the actual name for it? It's not Vorthos. They haven't used the word Vorthos. It's Lore Finder, flavor text, artists, so you can type in on the Lore Finder cell, you could type in any character's name or like a place or whatever, and it'll go through all of the flavor texts, all of the names on any card in Magic the Gathering, find them for you. It's an incredible thing to use, especially if you're doing like a tribal deck or a deck that in EDH that revolves around a certain theme. This is the most amazing resource. There are a few other content creators as well that do random Scryfall cards. I know Shivan Butt also does this on his Twitter. So if you like the idea of just having someone just comment on a random card every day, there's lots of people who do it, and I do this just for fun. I know that sounds kind of sad. I do it just for fun. Every now and then, if I'm really bored, I'll just random card on Scryfall, see what I can find. I'm just doing this with the microphone now. Anyway. Cool, great. Let's hit that random card button. First up, we'll do 5 cards total. First up, here we go. We have Circuit Mender, artifact creature insect. When Circuit Mender enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. When Circuit Mender leaves the battlefield, you draw a card. The flavor text reads, inspired by industrious silkworms. Its maker crafted in it to restore the broken pieces of the world. 2/3, illustrated by Hector Ortiz. And it's from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. This is a really new one. Incredible. What I really loved about Kamigawa in general, this is something that Kaladesh did too, is the idea of blending that nature versus technology world. And this isn't like a new concept, right, in high fantasy or sci-fi or whatever. Like, you have games, for example, like out now, you have Horizon Forbidden West and Horizon Zero Dawn. Those games are all about like nature and technology kind of coming together. But in Magic cards, I think it's most explicit, obviously, in artifact creatures. That's the most likely natural place for it to go. But artifact creatures that are explicitly animals that have been like automatons made to look like them. Like, for example, you had Filigree Familiar, that was Little Fox in Kaladesh, and obviously Circuit Mender here being an insect in Kamigawa. But the amazing thing about Kamigawa is maybe not this particular card, but the fact that they had the artifact equipments be the creatures as well, which was an incredible piece of design. I mean, one that just jumps to mind, for example, is the reality chip is a jellyfish, and you had, there was one that was a monkey and a snake and all this kind of thing. I just love this idea that you have these bits of technology throughout the multiverse that even in the parts of in the planes that are the most technologically advanced, they always go back to nature, right? We're going into Dominaria and the Brothers' War later this year, and obviously we will see mechs and tech and automatons in the war between Urza and Mishra, and some of those are incredible pieces of technology in the Magic world, and like a far cry from our circuit mender here in terms of their scope and what they're trying to do. But yeah, it really exciting. I always love seeing artifact creatures that are indeed creatures. I mean, you get more abstract ones, right? Like something like a worm coil engine is interesting, but I think it's because a worm is kind of, as in the WURM, is kind of in the fancy realm. Also, things like Steel Hellkite is a like automaton dragon, but because they're already fancy creatures, I don't know, is that the same? But there we are. Hector Ortiz as well is a magic artist that I'm pretty familiar with. Been illustrating for the game in a few different sets now. Only 11 cards, really, which is interesting because it's definitely a name that I hear pop up like quite often. Couple of cards in unsets, some more recent cards as well. Mysterious Limousine, which was one of Sheldon Menery last week on our Flavour Picks episode for New Capenna. That was one of his Flavour Picks there. And yeah, you can definitely see Hector's style is all about those kind of nature shapes in nature into artifacts. If you look at Combine Chrysalis and Chrome Courier, which Hector did for what do you call it? One Horizons 2? There you go. You can see absolute influences of these things aren't like realistic animals or, you know, but the shapes and the kind of style that they're using are definitely insectoid in nature. So yeah, really cool. Love a bit of Circuit Mender. Nice low ball ones, kind of get into the mood. All right. How long was that? How much time did I waste? A few minutes? Cool. Let's waste a few minutes more. This is only going to be a short episode, by the way. I'm literally just booting up the microphone, just going, trying something new. Didn't want to go a week without doing something. Might take a week off next week. I'm just now editorializing on air. Okay, random card number 2. Here we go. Brothers Yamazaki. Oh, we are really stuck in Kamigawa today. Alright, Brothers Yamazaki is a 2 and a red legendary creature, human samurai, Bushido 1. If there are exactly 2 permanents named Brothers Yamazaki on the battlefield, the legend rule doesn't apply to them. Each other creature named Brothers Yamazaki gets +2/+2 and haste. It's a 2/1, art by Ron Spears. Oh man, Ron Spears. Now that is a name in Magic which you can't get around, really. That is just... I mean, the art for Ron Spears is fantastic. I mean, my favourite Ron Spears artwork has to be Achroma Angel of Wrath, the OG art for it. And yeah. Also, Biorhythm is another one that EDH players might be aware of just because it's a banned card, and so that image kind of pops up well. Now, there are 2 Brothers Yamazaki cards. It's not just the same card that if you have 2 of it on the battlefield, the legend rule doesn't apply. There are 2 cards, same function, so same game piece, I suppose, but the art on them is different. So you have both of the Brothers Yamazaki. And obviously for gameplay that doesn't necessarily matter, but it's a really nice little touch. Obviously both artworks are by Ron Spears. Obviously we've seen this referenced in Neon Dynasty as well, with the cousins Yamazaki, I suppose you could say, who are Heiko Yamazaki, the general, and Noriko Yamazaki, the poet. They actually had their own side stories done about them as well. Now, they've obviously tweaked it here with the newer Yamazakis, because they are not the same game piece, and they don't necessarily play around with the legend rule, but it's a nice little flavour touch. This whole idea is an interesting one in OG Kamigawa about legendary rules not applying to things. You get a lot of that because obviously it's a set about legends, and I guess it kind of needed to happen in gameplay terms, because if the majority of your creature cards are legendary, then it makes it very hard to gain any sort of board state if you're playing in limited or in standard. But these cards specifically, the Brothers Yamazaki, really use that non-legendary rule to its advantage. Obviously this is slightly earlier Magic, where legendary creatures themselves weren't necessarily as prominent game pieces or even narrative storytelling devices, and so to have a bold swing, to have the same functional game piece act in a way where there are multiples of that one legendary, and having that rule that you can take away the legendary rule, so you can play both of them and have this kind of bolstering of each other, and then to give those two different artworks to the same game piece, which they did quite a lot in earlier Magic sets as well. But for this exact sort of example, it's just so much fun. I kind of wish they did more of this. There was a card in New Capenna, which was the... Oh gosh, I can't remember the name of it. It's the Knuckle Dusters, the equipment that's the Knuckle Dusters. And it creates a token that's just another copy of those Knuckle Dusters, right? Because then you get one on each hand. And I can't actually remember, did they get a token? That is interesting. No, I don't think they did get a token. So there you go. So a set that's all the way along from OG Kamigawa, and they're actually not doing as much with the having two versions of the same game piece on the deck. There we go. I don't know. It was a nice little touch. Brothers Yamazaki are not great cards, but because of the way they function, they're instantly recognisable in the game. And I kind of wish we would see more of it. But there we go. That's just me. All right, moving on. Let's do another random card. Royal Assassin. Creature, human assassin, 1 black, tap to destroy target tapped creature. Trained in the arts of stealth, royal assassins choose their victims carefully, relying on timing and precision rather than brute force. 1/1. And this is actually the Junior Series Europe promo with the art by, oh god, I'm going to butcher this name, Tom Vernestrad, which is not the sort of classic Mark Zug art that I think most people would be aware of. Or indeed, there's another Tom Vernestrad that's actually the OG artwork for Royal Assassin. This one is very much more similar to that one than to the Mark Zug one. I think it's the same sort of model, if you like, for the assassin. But yeah, I love Royal Assassin. I used to run a 60-card kitchen table deck, which was all tappy assassin cards. It was in Dimir. So you had this, you had Agent of Fates. And then I used to run that with like hidden strings as well. So you would attack him with you would attack with Agent of Fates, play hidden strings, target the Agent of Fates to do all the tap untap shenanigans because it had heroic, and it would destroy tap target creature. I think it was no, that was Royal Assassin. But you could control the board state by having all these kind of very similar, slightly like Dimiri effects of having things that are tapped die. And that's the direction they went in a lot with Assassins. And I don't think that's anything they've kept up. And I don't know why. I really wanted to have a tappy Assassins Dimir EDH deck, because I really loved that 60-card deck. And then you could use the hidden strings tech, right? But they seem definitely to have gone more down the clone route for Assassins. Or like ninjas, for example, ninjutsu obviously being their sort of primary mechanic seems to be definitely more the thing that they want to do. Sort of like sneaky surprise plays rather than tapping down your creatures and destroying them, which is a bit of a shame. I've actually never seen this promo artwork before, which is kind of wild. It's really cool. I like it a lot. Kiku, the Night's Flower, which is another Kamikawa card, is another really good example of like an assassin card, which I kind of wish they did something like more of a reference to it in the newer Kamigawa set. Kiku Knight's Flower is black for a human assassin. You can pay 2 and 2 black to tap Kiku, and then target creature deals damage to itself equal to its power. So it's like these assassins have like the tapping sort of mechanic really has this, like, they have their one shot to kill the creature, because then it leaves you open, right, as the player. If you tap all your assassin creatures down and they don't quite do what they're meant to do, like the opponent plays an indestructible spell or some kind of interrupt, obviously then you're wide open to have the crackback, which again is exactly what Royal Assassin is doing here. And also a 3 mana cost creature, 1/1. yeah, is not going to be blocking any time soon either. So yeah, I really love the Royal Assassin. It is a classic Magic card for a reason. I have to say I maybe prefer the Mark Zug artwork, but that's just me. I'm a little bit biased. But yeah, there we go. Trained Assassin. We're burning through these. I might do more than 5. This won't be a long episode. Next up, we are stuck in Kamigawa. Listeners, I'm sorry, this is not my intention. We have Sakashima the Imposter, the original Sakashima, from Saviors of Kamigawa. Sakashima the Imposter is 2 blue, for a legendary creature human rogue. You may have Sakashima the Imposter enter the battlefield as a copy of any target creature on the battlefield, except its name is Sakashima the Imposter. It's legendary in addition to its other types, and has 2 blue. Return this creature to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. 3/1. This illustration by RK Post. The amazing RK Post. I love this artwork, by the way. I know this is an audio podcast. You probably can't visualize it perfectly, but if you're on your phone, you can, watch along. You know what I mean. I mean, this is just the clone of all clones, right? The idea that you can bounce it back to your hand is really interesting. I really like that, especially for Sakashima specifically, because Sakashima has all the different masks that let it kind of morph and disguise themselves into other people. So the fact that it can return to your hand and then you can play it out again is them changing the mask over, which is really nice and clean. Usually in clone decks, I have an Actress Oracle Half-Truths deck that isn't a pure clones deck, but does run a lot of clones as part of the inherent synergies of what I'm doing with that deck. And the trick is always, how do I upgrade this clone? If I play turn 3, turn 4 clones and no one else has anything good, I'm like, well, I still want the value, and maybe if it's like a Solemn Simulacrum that I'm copying or whatever, then I can get the value out of it. But then how do I reuse these guys? And it's always the trick is that, to flicker or blink them or whatever. But Sakashima is such a master clone that they can do it themselves, which I think, or they have the inherent ability themselves to change up what they're doing. Clones in Magic or shapeshifters in Magic are also the most interesting characters I find, which is ironic, because I personally do not like changelings and shapeshifters as a creature type. Obviously, this is a human rogue, and the effect is a clone effect, right? But the most explicit shapeshifters in the game, I tend to actually not like as a broad creature type. However, characters such as Sakashima or Lazav, who's the mastermind of the Dimir, these characters always seem to have the most kind of unexpected story arcs, or the kind of stories and the flavour behind them that is the most intriguing, simply because they're so mysterious. And I'd love to see more of them, or at least the clones that we have having a much more prominent role in what's going on. Imagine Lazav if he was a planeswalker. That'd be absolutely wild. Like the kind of chaos that could ensue because of that, right? And yeah, I love the fact that it's also like a real blue effect as well. It just fits so cleanly into the idea of like illusion, but not just illusion in terms of like the facade, but also in terms of warping the reality of those around you, right? Because you're not just changing your face, you also have to convince that person, like their perception of reality is completely flipped, because they assume that they're talking to one person when they're actually talking to another. And so blue for shapeshifters, I just don't think I've ever stated it, or Nathan's ever stated it on this podcast, is just absolutely perfect. Black would be maybe another one, depending on the flavour of how it's done. I think that'd be quite interesting. Hence why, I guess, a lot of clones are blue-black. But there we go. RK Post as well. We've spoken about RK Post on this podcast many a time. Just such a prolific artist in the game, and so like singular in style as well. Like you'd always tell an RK Post piece, and been doing it for so long as well. I think I remember talking on this show about RK's Angels. Lightning Angel was one of the very first rares that I ever owned as a Magic card. I actually have a signed copy as well, because I saw RK Post at Magic Fest London pre-pandemic. Also have a signed Phyrexian Reclamation as well, which I really treasure. But just the style that RK Post brings to the game is incredible. And also the kind of thing that we're going to be seeing like again this year, this kind of tech punk. I was about to say cyberpunk. It's not quite cyberpunk, but like tech punk aesthetic to high fantasy. Even in Sakashima, obviously it's high fantasy Japan, but it still has like a real kind of like this wouldn't be an out of place character in some kind of post apocalyptic wasteland aesthetic as well, which I think is just is a testament to the artist. Also, you get like really weird ones from Arcade Post, like Simic Sky Swallower, which you just look at and go, obviously that is their artwork, but wow, that's just so wild and different. Yeah, I could do a whole hour just talking about Arcade Post. I won't though. In fact, let's move on. That was Sakashima the Imposter. Love it. Next card up. Crib Swap. 2 and a white for a tribal instant shapeshifter. Scryfall is listening into this conversation. Changeling. This card has every creature type at all times. Exile target creature. Its controller puts a 1/1 colors shapeshifter creature token with Changeling onto the battlefield. And the artwork is by Brandon Dorman. This card is bizarre. It is absolutely bizarre. The artwork shows a crib with a child in it with snake eyes and green skin grinning at a very concerned-looking parent. It's kind of hard to tell for scale. I think this is like a halfling. I could be wrong. I mean, it's from Lore Whims, so it's actually probably a Kithkin, isn't it? Yeah, it's definitely a Kithkin. Yeah, this card is just very strange. The fact that you have tribal instants is an interesting concept in Magic Flavour that I don't think we've seen for a very long time. In fact, I am going to look it up. The idea that spells could have tribal loyalties is kind of a real wild one. That makes perfect sense in a microcosm, but the more you pick at it from a function point of view, the more you think, well, why doesn't literally every spell have some kind of tribal affinity? And then you start to get into the layers of, well, if that was the case, then 99% of all spells in Magic that aren't creatures would be wizard tribal, right? Or shaman tribal. So yes, it's I think it's an incredible thing that they tried, in the sense that they tried it in, but I don't know if it can be something they bring back. I hear people all the time saying how they should bring it back and how it should be more of a thing. I just don't see how, when we're trying to make sets a bit more coherent across standard, or when we're trying to do things that are way more specific, bringing this kind of tribal sorcery in would just open up a whole can of worms. I mean, yeah, pretty much just across Lorwyn and Worldwake, I'm going to say, because they're Eldrazi. Rise of the Eldrazi. So Eldrazi Conscription, for example, is another tribal enchantment, because it's specific to do with... the effect of it is specific to the Eldrazi in like a really direct, flavorful way. Great, obviously, if you're playing effects that rely on the tribes that you're playing, or have like cost reductions because of it. Like, that is actually really quite interesting. I kind of wish... obviously, this is just my bias. They should have done it for werewolves and vampires in the latest Innistrad set, no? Just 2 tribes. You could have just done it for those 2 tribes. And then that would have given both tribes the support they would have needed to really like face off against each other in the storyline. Although they didn't really face off against each other in the storyline, which is kind of a missed opportunity. Okay. Alright. I'm happy that tribal spells don't necessarily exist in Magic anymore. But yes. Also, tribal shapeshifter. Really? Just makes me dislike shapeshifters even more. If they're all tribes, why are they getting tribal stuff? Anyway, moving on. Random card. Gift of Growth. 1 and a green instant, and with Kicker 2, untap target creature, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. If this spell was kicked, that creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn instead. Illustrated by YW Tang. Excellent. Classic example of green growth spells. This is from Dominaria, by the way. The long-standing tradition of having green growth spells depicting a giant version of a creature. You see it on things like, Titanic growth or colossification, etc., is one that I'm so happy we have in Magic, because it brings, it's both terrifying and whimsical at the same time. It's a perfect encapsulation of what green is and what green does, and so often it allows for just glorious high fantasy paintings that you wouldn't necessarily get in any other effect in Magic. Things getting literally bigger is not something you see really in any other colour, for example. Even with other colours having pseudo pump effects. Gift of Growth depicts I'm going to say it's a stag, obviously a high fantasy stag, bursting giant out of a line of trees into a plane. It's one of those kinds of things that, especially if you're playing kitchen table Magic, like Giant Growth and Titanic Growth and all those cards, are definitely the first cards that you really learn how the game works for things like pump effects, especially if they're at instant speed, but even sorceries, for example, to play the sorcery before you attack, so the thing gets bigger, blah, 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 blah. And that flavour of that being what green does really sits with players. I think, for me, when I first started playing, if I had to run through the 5 colours of what do these things do, it was haste for red. Hasty red things go fast now. Black was definitely things like ping effects. Even though they were mixed with white a little, because I played a lot during Ravnica, so the extort mechanic, for example, Thrall Parasite, or Parasite Thrall, whatever. Or vampires in black as well were a big one, so Lifelink was a big thing as well. First Strike for white, I don't know why that's the one that sits for me. Blue was counter magic. Generally speaking, I played a lot with Nathan's collection. There were definitely a lot of counter spells going around. And for green, it was trample and growth effects. And I do there's a lot of chat at the moment about in New Capenna, a lot of the green cards have treasure synergies, especially in the Riveteers, Jund kind of flavoured cards. And as much as I'm not hugely upset about them, because they are in a set that is very treasure-centric, it is tricky for players of a certain generation to think of green doing things like that, when this idea of kind of bombastic growth is exactly what we wanted. Making artifacts and making wealth and treasure isn't kind of the same deal as boof, your deer is now 50 feet high. So I understand that completely. I'm not hugely against it. I don't really have an opinion. But if I did have an opinion, that would be it. Yeah. Really nice. It's one of those Magic cards that just really gets me really nostalgic for sitting at a kitchen table with my friends for hours and hours and hours, playing crappy little 60-card decks that we just pull out of a box and throw together. It was a return. Was it Return to Ravnica or a Dragon's Maze box? I think it was a Return to Ravnica box that Nathan and a friend of ours at the time, he's still a friend, but we used to live with him, AJ, they bought a booster box of Return to Ravnica, and they merged that with a bunch of other boosters, random boosters that they bought from the nearby sets. This is before I was buying my Magic cards. I was, stealing off of them. And then Nathan's just kind of back catalogue of collection. Then AJ had a bit of a collection. It was all this mishmash of cards that was majoritively sort of 2012 era standard, and just a whole bunch of other stuff. And yeah, just throwing together 60 card decks, no sleeves, playmats because we're not heathens. But, decks held together with rubber bands, don't take that, Daggerdrome Imp, because I'm going to use that for the black-white life gain deck that I'm going to do tomorrow, and blah, 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 blah. And, yeah, even though this is a card from Dominaria, the effect is enough to really bring you back to those times. And it's something to be said for returning mechanics in Magic. This is a wild tangent now. This is far off this card. But there are voices of saying, some effects in Magic just need to be kind of phased out, or they've done this card, or, whatever else. And I just sort of think there is a real value to having variations on a theme that sits outside just the functionality of a healthy standard or a healthy limited environment. And that is that recurring themes do have a comforting effect on you if you know like want to play in a certain style, or if you want to emulate a time of your sort of Magic playing career, you can go back to certain styles that are present in newer sets. And although it's really super exciting to see some of the play design stuff that they've been doing over the past few sets, especially with things like Legendary Creatures, New Capenna has just gone ham with the idea of like what Legendary Creatures can do and the kinds of effects, singular effects they have. There is also something to be said for the kind of workhorses of Magic card design, and Gift of Growth is part of that legacy. Cool. Getting teary-eyed over a green pump spell. Ugh. Should we do one more? This is going to be super fast episode. Let's do one more. Bloodthirsty Adversary. 1 and a red for a creature vampire. Haste. When Bloodthirsty Adversary enters the battlefield, you may pay 2 and a red any number of times. When you pay this cost 1 or more times, put that many 1/1 counters on Bloodthirsty Adversary, then exile up to that many target instant and or sorcery cards with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard and copy them. You may cast any number of the copies without paying their mana costs. 2/2. Oh, I'm so sorry. The illustration is by Hyunhwa Cho. I'm so sorry for butchering that name. I do apologise. This is from Midnight Hunt. One of the better vampire cards was in Midnight Hunt, as well as very many of the better werewolf cards were in Crimson Vow, but whatever, I'm not going to be talking about that now. This is at Mythic Rare as well, hence why there is a wall of text on this card. Also, it's got haste. Red card's got haste. What did I just say? Red's got to go fast. Who's going to listen to this episode? My gosh. Bloodthirsty Adversary is a really nice sort of legacy of the vampires on Innistrad using one-handed crossbows. I know that's like, if that's the flavour I'm picking out of this card, is kind of wild. But you had, what was it, Falconwrath Executioner? Yeah, no, Falconwrath Exterminator, I do apologise, from Avacyn Restored, was another red vampire card that had one-handed crossbows. And interestingly, dual wielding. Interestingly, both of these cards also play around with 1/1 counters as well, which is, I think, a really nice like little callback. Like, who decided that if you're using mini crossbows as part of your like vampire like artillery, then that's the gimmick, is plus 1/1 counters. I think it's really cool. Also, a really nice way to get archers, the creature type archers, into red. I mean, funnily enough, Bloodthirsty Adversary isn't an archer, but Falconwrath Exterminator is. So maybe actually that's something that they've changed in the sort of intervening time between the two Innistrad sets. Or I should say between the first and the latest Innistrad set. But Falconwrath Exterminator, at least from Avacyn Restored, was a nice way to get red archers into the game, because this idea that like it's quick, it's reload, it's fast, it's like, you know, smash, smash, smash. Yeah, really nice idea, rather than the kind of more considered archers in green and white, maybe. Hyunwha Cho is an illustrator that's done like around 43 cards for the game. Really nice artwork as well. This is a name that doesn't pop up in like sort of my mind's eye of artists very often. However, they have done quite a few cards, and quite a few cards as well that have sort of legacy with other ones, like Nighthawk Scavenger in Zendikar Rising, which is obviously a play on Vampire Nighthawk. Skewer the Critics is another great piece by them as well, which was on that standard for Ravnica Allegiance, was one of the better cards that I had several copies of. You'll notice a lot of the artworks of figures by this artist as well have like really broad movement. There's a lot of like arms outstretched in almost every single one of the artworks, so that's clearly something that they like really enjoy. I mean, if you go to their Scryfall page and just go down, like Assassin's Inc., Katsumasa the Animator, Oran Skyclave Hierophant, Nighthawk Scavenger, Maniacal Rage, Ryu Storm's Edge, Riona Fire Dancer, Siani Eye of the Storm. I mean, I could keep going. Skewer the Critics, Teferi Who Slows Time, Time Wipe, Thalissi Reverent Medium, Renan 7, Volrath Shapeshifter, and Zariel Archduke of Avernus all have the same sort of pose going on. And it's, it's the kind of thing that I suppose you could look at an artist and go, I'm just doing the same thing over and over again. But it's clear that this is a style that is perfect just for a Magic card frame and really gives a lot of these characters like movement where otherwise they might not have any. I mean, obviously something like Riona Fire Dancer is a card that inherently sort of suggests movement. But if you're looking at like Katsumasa the Animator, how are you going to make that card interesting? There are other characters that are similar to Katsumasa. For example, Sai, Master Thopterist, that if you had similar sort of feels of a character every single card art, it would just kind of get boring. So I like it when artists find their niche. It's like Kiranyana. Every card Kiranyana illustrates is a character sitting down in a glorious chair looking regal, and I'm not even mad about it. I mean, yeah, I'd say every character. Not every character, but, I mean, Prime Speaker Vanifar, Queen Marchesa, Professor Onyx. I think Kenrith, the Returned King, is also another one of Kiranyana's. Xanathar, Guild Kingpin. All these characters that are sat like nice and regally in a chair. All of them Kiranyana's. So yeah, Bloodthirsty Adversary. I don't necessarily know why this card also interacts with instants and sorceries, especially copying them from the graveyard. It's part of that adversary cycle, right? So this is one of the cards in that set where you had Intrepid Adversary, Bloodthirsty Adversary, Primal, Spectral, and Tainted. And I guess they all did something kind of interesting. They all did something kind of interesting with counters, which is kind of a nice tie-in as well. And they all had this kind of, the amount of times that you pay for something happens. But, yeah, with Bloodthirsty Adversary, this was actually one of Nathan's Flavour picks from this set. I don't quite know where it does the instant sorceries thing. But, whatever. Not all Flavour can be apparent or accurate. But, yeah. There we go. I don't really know why I recorded this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you thought of me doing solo, whether the ramblings are just ramblings or whether you actually think these are worthwhile to do. Or don't. Maybe I'd rather not know. If you have any cards that you want to get my opinion on the flavour of, then hit me up at mtflavouring. Emails go to mtflavouring@gmail.com also. And yeah, I've kind of enjoyed this. I really enjoyed just booting up the laptop and hitting random and just going. So yeah, I hope to see you next time. All that remains for me to say is thank you so much for listening. This has been Magic the Flavouring.